And welcome. This is Michigan's AutoTalk podcast, and this is episode number 80. We remind you every episode of Michigan's AutoTalk is about celebrating the automobile and everything automotive. We're also about helping and supporting you, car and truck owners across our great state of Michigan, birthplace of everything automotive. We have a special episode in store for you. We're pretty excited about that. Hosts Al Schwinkendorf and John Puhek are here. And most importantly, I want to introduce our guest. And I am very excited about this because I've heard a lot about this place. In fact, a good friend of mine who grew up in Warren told me about the Piquette Automotive Plant about a year ago. And so we did a little research on that. And we're like, okay, we have to get this guy on. So we're very pleased to welcome Barry Cogan. Barry is one of the trustees with the Piquette Automotive Plant, and he is in the southeast side of Michigan. I didn't ask you where you are, Barry, but nonetheless, welcome to the podcast. We appreciate you taking some time to join us.
We have to ask him, are you at the museum right now, or do you have that picture in your basement? Your background.
That's a virtual background.
That is just a virtual background.
Oh, okay.
I thought I'd put it up just in case you haven't been here, so that you could see what the building looks like today.
That's awesome. You're way more high tech than us.
So Barry, we'd love to get a little backstory. We know you're a member of the board of trustees, but this was, of course, the old plant where the Model A was built, or was it a Model T?
Model T was that's our biggest claim to fame. Is it's the birthplace of the Model T. The Ford Piquette plant is it's the first factory that was built and owned by Ford Motor Company in 1904, and it's actually their second factory. They had a small rented building where they introduced their first car, the Model A. And then they built this and moved in at the end of 1904. And surprisingly, they were only here for 5 years.
Wow.
In 5 years, they outgrew it.
Was there an assembly line at the plant before this?
No, there never was an assembly line.
The first one was here.
No, the first one was in Highland Park, where they moved to after this.
Did they make Model Ns at your location?
Yes.
Okay.
They made all of the letter cars except the Model A here. They made the B, C, F, K, N, R, S, and the first 14,000 plus Model Ts in this building.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just learned more about the early Ford models than I've ever known in my entire life.
I have a question that puzzles me. I love old architecture and stuff like that. And I look at this. Why did they need 3 floors? Now, I know they didn't build this for making cars. He rented it, right?
No, they built this. This was a purpose-built plant.
How did that work? Did the cars actually use 3 levels to get built?
We look at this building now today, and we wonder, what were they thinking? To build an assembly plant with 3 floors where you had to take all the raw materials up to the 3rd floor, which is where most of the assembly took place, build the cars, and then take them down on an elevator to ship them. But I mean, everybody was doing the same thing. They were building multi-level buildings, just similar to this back in the day.
The way to build is go straight up.
That's right. Yeah.
And it probably gave him good motivation to make the assembly line.
Yeah. There's an interesting story that when they first moved into this building, someone said to Henry Ford, "Why did you build it so big? We'll never fill this space." Well, that was they were moving in at the end of 1904, and by 1906, they had 16 other buildings on the property. They had outgrown this one so much by that time. Wow. That they had 16 other buildings, and they were in the process of buying the land in Highland Park to build that new facility.
Now, I've read a couple of biographies on Ford and his whole procedure, and I don't know if it was this building or maybe you can shed some light on it, but one of them, to my understanding, in the basement was a shooting range through he was not a ex-Pinkerton, but somewhat of a sketchy fella that he had, that Ford Senior had employed. And is that in the basement there, or is this?
No. There really isn't a basement to this building. There's the first three, just the three floors. Most likely that would have been at the Rouge. Okay. Much later at the Rouge where that happened. If that in fact is a true story, I've heard it too. Yeah, I've heard it too, and it could very well be.
That's fascinating. Well,
so if we go visit, what do we see?
What you will see is the museum occupies the second and third floors. We rent out a portion of the first floor to make some money to help us pay the bills. And the museum is encompassed on the second and third floors. We have approximately just under 60 vehicles on display, most of them Fords, ranging in age from 1903 to 1931. And so you will see a building that there are parts of it that look just like it would have looked when Ford left it in 1910. The peeling paint, the worn maple flooring, the paint peeling off of the walls. It gives you chills actually to think about the history of this building.
Wood framed, encased in brick, right? I read.
Absolutely.
Are
yes,
those like the original windows and stuff?
Those are the original windows, although they have all been restored using the original wood species, and as much as possible saving the original glass.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I also heard that when they moved, he sold it to Studebaker.
Yes, that's
which
correct.
Is a company very near and dear to my heart. My grandpa worked there for 55 years doing interior work for them down in South Bend. So I thought that was interesting that Studebaker had a plant. I know they didn't build the Avantis in South Bend, but I didn't know they built cars in Detroit.
They did. In fact, they had a huge presence here. When Ford moved out in 1910, they sold the building. They sold the entire property to Studebaker in 1911. And the building that you see next to this one is actually built by Studebaker. And that's a 4-story Albert Kahn designed building. And they built that in the early 1920s to supplement what they were doing in the Piquette plant. But even before that, in 1911, they had just purchased the EMF company.
Okay.
And EMF had a huge factory that encompassed the entire next block down the street. So Studebaker was actually 2 full city blocks right next to this building. So they had a huge presence here, and they were here until the mid-1930s.
That's fascinating.
Very interesting. That's probably when they moved to South Bend after that.
Yep.
You know, there's so much about this old history and that we don't know. I've been to the museum, the Studebaker Museum in South Bend many, many times, and I never knew about their presence in Detroit. I know they weren't always there, but that's very interesting to me.
Yeah. You think Studebaker and you think South Bend.
Yep.
And you're right. A lot of people don't realize what a big presence they had here in Detroit.
And by that point in time, they weren't making wagons anymore. They were actually building cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Barry Cogan is our guest, by the way, in this episode of Michigan's Auto Talk. He is one of the trustees for the Piquette Avenue Automotive Plant in the museum, and we're talking about that. By the way, the website, which is terrific, is FordPiquettePlant.org. Ford, P-I-Q-U-E-T-T-E, plant.org. They're located right in downtown Detroit, actually not far from the intersection of I-94 and I-75. And as I look at that on the map, is it called Milwaukee Town? Am I reading that?
Milwaukee Junction, named after an intersection of railroads nearby.
Okay. And you are open to the public and really do tours for all kinds of groups. Is it fair enough to say you can see most of the museum, Barry, in a couple of hours?
Yes. We're open Wednesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And your admission price includes a docent-led tour at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, or 2 o'clock. And the tours generally last about an hour and a half. And then you're welcome to roam the building as for as long as we're open on the given day.
Now,
I want to do a podcast from here.
That'd be awesome.
Well, we're gonna have to set that up. Barry, I don't know if you've ever done any of those guided tours, but I'm curious, as close as you are to the museum and the Piquette plant, is there one common thing that most visitors come away from surprised or wow, I never knew that about the Model T or about Ford?
Mostly what they come away surprised about is the building itself. We really don't consider ourselves an automobile museum. Our number one artifact is the building, and people are just shocked that this thing exists in the condition that it exists after 118 years.
Yeah,
that this is still standing, and that it's being restored to like it was 118 years ago. That's probably the most shocking thing that people come away with.
Who there's a couple things I want to ask about. When you look at the background behind you, the telephone poles and that, or power poles, what I always call them telephone poles.
Yeah.
Usually they go out both sides. This one they put right down the sidewalk, and the wires only go off to the right because that obviously came after the building was built. And just what year was it constructed?
1904.
That's
crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
It's still there.
it is pretty amazing. Barry, as
who are your what's your average person who's backing this? I mean, do you have corporations? Does Ford Motor Company help you? Do you have certain like Mustang clubs and groups and stuff? Or who's in there backing you guys to do this?
We have no affiliation whatsoever with Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
We do have very good involvement with individual members of the Ford family.
Okay.
In fact, one of the members of the Ford family is on our board of trustees.
I saw that. Yeah.
So we get their support, but everything is done through people walking in the door, paying admission to view it. And we also have a very robust event business and wedding business. We average probably over 50 weddings a year.
Wow.
Weddings and or receptions.
That'd be a great
in
place
the building.
to get hitched.
Yeah, it's a cool place. Let me tell you, to either have your reception or your wedding and reception. We're very aggressive at going after grants. We just received a major grant from the National Park Service to help us with a redo of the electrical system in the building.
And that's worth much more than being on I know Michigan has its, I see the sign in front of the front door. I forget what they call it, but you're a historical building.
Yes.
Because you're X amount of years old and all that kind of stuff. But that's incredible. And I what I really like is the fact that despite the fact that people are there to preserve the factory, when I go to your website and look at what all the cars you've got and all the weird stuff hanging on the walls, which is like, I'm thinking somebody found that in the back corner and instead of throwing it away, cleaned it up and hung it on the wall.
Yeah.
I got to believe that. It's really cool.
It's a neat place. And it's amazing. It was actually saved from the wrecking ball. The previous owner to us was a real estate investment company, and they actually had plans to demolish the building and build a modern warehouse type facility in its place. And through the efforts of one individual, an anatomy professor of all things at Wayne State University, Dr. Jerry Mitchell, and an organization called the Henry Ford Heritage Association, they understood the significance of this building and put together the money to purchase the building and begin to turn it into a museum. So it's truly a success story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it speaks so much to, at that time, the architect and the design. It wasn't just a building. Like you're saying, you're having weddings. I don't picture too many weddings going on at a modern,
The
Ford F-150, like, oh, I'm going to get married on the assembly line. Nope. It's just an old pole barn.
But the other thing is anything that, even if you're not focusing on the automotive end of it, like Gilmore is and stuff like that, anything that's going on in Michigan and particularly Detroit, to preserve that being the Motor City, I think is really cool because I've lived in West Michigan all but 3 years of my life. It took me until I was like 15 years old to realize that every machine shop, every plastic shop, every plating shop, all those that were over here in Grand Rapids were all feeding Ford, Chrysler, and GM on the other side of the state. And, you read the article on a bag of Kingsford charcoal, how Henry set up his loser brother-in-law or something in the charcoal business, taking the old wood from the Model-T body wood and all those things, and the ship lines that he owned back in those days, and just how big it is and how much it's changed. I think it's really cool that you've got a very, very unique piece of automotive history in Detroit, and that's awesome.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Barry Cogan is one of the trustees with the Ford Piquette Avenue Plant. A great place that you can visit, and you can learn more at fordpiquetteplant.org. Barry, we can't let you go without asking the personal probing question. You're a Model T guy. When did the bug bite? I mean, you've got a wonderful background as a teacher. Were you always interested in the car, or what hooked you on the car itself?
Well, when I was growing up, I was always fascinated with antique cars. I grew up in a small town, and we very, very rarely saw one. But when I did, I always thought, geez, I'd like to have one of those one day. So, it was one of those things that you gets put off and put off and put off until the last kid was out of college and there was a little bit of extra money in the bank account. And so I went looking for a Model A. And I didn't find what I wanted, but what I found was a Dodge Brothers. And I fell in love with it and bought it. And
what year was it?
It was a 1926
okay.
Dodge Brothers touring car.
Mine was a 36, is the oldest Dodge I ever had.
Okay. All right. So you understand
Yes, I do.
the fascination with them. Well, as car guys know, it's a disease.
Yep.
You can't have just one. And so then I started looking for my Model A, and I found one. It was in Missouri, and I bought it and brought it home. And I was just going to do a little bit of cleanup on it and everything. But, you take this part off and you say, well, as long as I got that off, maybe I'll take that off. And pretty soon I had the whole
begins.
Yeah.
Case, yeah.
I had the whole car disassembled, and it's the only one car that I own that I did a ground up restoration on.
Oh, very nice.
And it's a beautiful 31 Deluxe Roadster, and in fact, I keep it on display at the Piquette plant as an example of what followed the Model T.
Oh, look at that! So, he gets free storage, and it's you're a smart guy.
No fool.
If this wouldn't, step over the line or anything, sometime we have to talk about the Dodge Brothers on this show. And I'm pretty confident that you know a lot about that because you were with that organization for a while.
I
understand.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Can you
still tour the mansion and stuff?
Pardon?
Can you still tour the mansion and stuff?
The Meadowbrook Hall?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they got hit by COVID like everybody else, but they're coming back, and I think they're open almost every day of the week now. Okay. So they're
and like Henry raced cars out on Frozen Lake St. Clair. The Dodge Brothers had boats. They were into the Gold Cup and stuff like that. Yeah, we got to talk to you about you know what? We could probably do about 6-7 episodes with you.
Well, make a point, Barry. We'll have you back to talk about the Dodge Brothers. And I love the story about your car, the Model A. I had mistakenly said it was a Model T, and I should have known better. And I'm just fascinated that as a young man, you took an eye to that car because generally speaking, it was more about the cars of your era and, what you grew up with. And I grew up with the muscle cars of the 60s, and I've got a 65 Galaxy 500. I always loved the Mustangs, but I wanted something different. And the Model A is just, It's a great car, and I bet most people call it a Model T when they see it because they don't know any better.
It's Ford's first drivable car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to be a mechanic and everything. I mean, the T's are cool, but they're T's. You know, Model 8, you could get in it and drive coast to coast.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I also have 3 Model Ts.
Oh,
So
okay.
You need to come over this way in the summer. We're going to go out and do a podcast from Gilmore and do the Model T driving school. Not too
Oh,
many people
really?
understand those 3 pedals.
Yeah.
yeah,
We'll,
I do. I love it.
we will get you the VIP invite, but you got to bring one of your cars, Barry. Okay.
There you go.
I'll do it.
All right. Well,
Nice.
this has been a real treat, and I knew we were fortunate to be able to get one of the trustees. We are now all excited and primed for a visit, so we'll talk
Please
offline and figure that out. But we're so excited to expose this wonderful building and collection of cars to those of us on the west side of the state and people from all over the world listen to this podcast. So who knows? You may get some visitors from places you never expected. So,
You know,
Wonderful.
everybody out there, Google it and just Google it and take a look. And
Yeah.
like they're 300, they've got a really, really good, it's almost like Google Maps, 360-degree view. You can go through it. And like I said, you can look at the pictures and the junk on the wall, which fascinates me, or a whole bunch of Model Ts and stuff like that. But yeah, it's worth checking out.
well, Barry, thank you so much for the time. That's going to put the wraps on this episode of Michigan's Auto Talk podcast, episode number 80, by the way. And you can check out all of our other episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including iHeart, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And we will say goodbye for this one. Come back with another episode very soon right here. Until next time, I am producer Phil Tower.
I am Al Schwinkendorf.
I'm John Puhek. Thanks for listening.